West Memphis 3 were a group of teenagers who took a liking to satanic rituals and occultism. These troubled teenagers were responsible for the murder of 3 8-year-olds, with people claiming that they had used the kids for sacrificial offerings. This case was one that generated a lot of controversy and claims of carelessness on the part of the police. This led to the creation of fundraisers and support groups to free the boys. There were also claims of emotional abuse by the court during the trial. All these combined make this case one to talk about. Welcome to Yarrow Crime. Today, we'll be taking a look at the West Memphis 3 and the disheartening and horrible crimes they committed. Before we go any further, please don't forget to like and subscribe to get updates on our latest videos. Now sit back as we take a look at the mysterious case of the West Memphis 3. West Memphis is the largest city in Crittenden County, and this is the city where our story today takes place. It is part of the Memphis metropolitan area and is located directly across the Mississippi River from Memphis, Tennessee. The West Memphis 3 were a group of 3 teenagers named Jason Baldwin, Jesse Niskelly, and Damien Eccles. At the time they were arrested, Jason Baldwin was 16 years old, Jesse Niskelly was 17 years old, and Damien Eccles was 18. Jesse, Damien, and Jason were known to be weirdos, and Damien claimed to be involved in Wicca and always wore black with a disturbing love for metallic music. There had been claims that just a year before the murders, Jesse boasted about worshipping the devil, drinking human blood, and sacrificing children. He came from a very poor family, was constantly visited by social workers, and rarely attended school. He had also been charged with burglary as a result of an incident when he and his girlfriend broke into a trailer. After this offense, he was made to spend some time in a mental institution. Jesse was also known to have a bad temper and was always engaging in fistfights with other students. Jason, on the other hand, was generally considered a good boy. Aside from having a record for shoplifting, he regularly scored high grades and had a talent for sketching and drawing, which led his teachers to encourage him to go into graphic design. Damien and Jason were close friends who had bonded over their similar tastes in music and fiction. Jesse, however, was not really their close friend, but had gotten acquainted with them just because they went to the same school. Steve Branch, one of the victims, was 8 at the time of his murder, and he was the son of Stephen and Penda Branch, who had divorced when Steve was an infant. Up until his death, he lived with his mom, Pamela, and his stepdad, Terry Hobbs. Christopher Byers, another victim, was also 8 at the time, and was the son of Melissa DeFire and Rick Murray. He was last seen wearing a white long-sleeve shirt and blue jeans. James Michael, the 3rd victim, was also 8 at the time, and was last seen wearing a scout uniform. On May 5, 1993, the 3 8-year-olds were reported missing. They had been seen by some neighbors at about 6:30 p.m. on the evening of their disappearance, and an initial search was conducted by some members of the neighborhood and by the police. The next day, a more thorough search was initiated by the police, who led the Crittenden County Search and Rescue Team. Despite the all-out and extensive search, the boys were nowhere to be found. It was not until juvenile parole officer Stephen Jones spotted a black shoe floating in a muddy creek down at Robin Hills, where the boys were last spotted, that the police conducted a focused search, which led to the discovery of the boys' bodies. They had been stripped naked and hot-teed with their own shoelaces. Their clothes were found twisted around, ticking, and turned inside out, with one of the boys, Christopher Byers, having lacerations in various parts of his body and mutilated genitals. Forensics later revealed that 2 of the boys, Stephen and Michael, died of multiple injuries and drowning, while Christopher died of multiple injuries. Following the discovery of the boys' bodies, the investigation into their assault and murder began. The police insisted that the case had a cult overtone, and this led them down the path of Damien Eccles and his crew. The police then brought their first and prime suspect, Damien Eccles, in for questioning. He denied having anything to do with the murders and took a polygraph examination, which the examiner insisted was indicating deception. Though he denied any involvement, the police still focused their attention on him. They would eventually get some help from Vicky Hutchison, who was a new resident at West Memphis and a friend of the three 8-year-olds. He claimed to have witnessed the murder, but was unable to recognize the perpetrators. Vicky, on the other hand, claimed to have attended a Wicca meeting, which later turned into an orgy. She claimed that it was at this point that she asked to go home. Vicky told the police that while at the gathering, Damien had gotten drunk and boasted about murdering the 3 kids. The police then interviewed one of Damien's acquaintances, Jesse Niskelly. It was said that despite Jesse having an IQ of 72 and being a minor, he was interrogated alone without his parents being present. Jesse's father claimed to have given instructions for his son to go with the police, but did not give permission for his son to be interrogated or questioned by the police. It is believed that Jesse was interviewed for an estimated 12 hours, of which only 46 minutes were recorded. His confession was later recanted, citing intimidation, fatigue and coercion from the police, and he also claimed to have been scared of the police who had threatened him. Though he had been read his Miranda rights, he insisted that he did not fully understand. Shortly after Jesse's confession, Jason and Damien were arrested. Despite advice from his lawyer, Jesse went on to make another confession in which he revealed to the police how the boys were assaulted and murdered. Moving on to the trial, Jesse was tried separately, while Damien and Jason were tried together. Jesse's attorney focused on the first interview and insisted that he had been coerced under duress. He initially claimed that the victims had been sexually assaulted, but the evidence that was recovered revealed otherwise, and the police insisted that he was confused. On February 5, 1994, he was convicted by a jury of 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. They sentenced him to life plus 40 years. Shortly after, the trial of the other 2 suspects, Jason and Damien, began. Though Jesse had made confessions, he refused to testify. This meant that the prosecution relied solely on circumstantial evidence. During the trial, an inmate reported that Jason had confessed to the murders, and 2 other girls claimed to have overheard Damien confessing to the murders during a softball game. On March 18, 1994, Jason and Damien were found guilty of first-degree murder. Damien was handed the death penalty, while Jason was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The investigation into the murders got a lot of criticism, especially for how the crime scene was handled by the police. A lot of errors were pointed out during the trial by Jesse's attorney. The 3 defendants would later appeal in May 1994, and in 2007, Damien petitioned for a withdrawal under a statute that permitted post-conviction DNA due to the development of new technology, but his appeal was denied. The trio also submitted imprints of their teeth, which were compared with bite marks on the forehead of Stephen Branch, one of the victims. The presence of bite marks on Stephen's forehead had not been mentioned in the initial trial, and none of the imprints were a match. Vicky Hutchison later recanted her statement, which she made when she visited the police station, claiming that everything she said during her interview with the police was fabricated. On August 19, 2007, the trio was released from prison after weeks of negotiations as part of a plea deal. They entered an Alford plea, which is a guilty plea in the United States criminal court, where a defendant admits to being guilty not because he is admitting to the crime, but because the prosecution has enough evidence that could possibly lead to a conviction in the court of law. This led to the judge sentencing them to 18 years and 78 days, which was the amount of time they had already spent in prison. After his release, Jesse got engaged to his high school girlfriend and enrolled in a community college. Jason, who was initially reluctant to accept the plea deal, claimed that he could not admit to committing a crime he did not commit. He later agreed and was also released. He is now believed to be working for a construction company and has plans to become a lawyer. Damien relocated to Salem, Massachusetts, with his wife and with the intention of having a career in writing and the visual arts. Thanks for watching. Please let us know what you think about this case in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest videos. See you in the next video.